So hello everyone, this is the guest talk by Brabeeba from MIT on animal intelligence in the mini course of computation. So Brabeeba is my good friend in multiple areas, include like music, cooking, hiking, and also like mathematics and neuroscience. Yeah, so he's like, we collaborate with, I collaborate with him in many research projects, and we always has lots of interesting discussion, sometimes very philosophical. Yeah, and he also taught me lots of mathematics. Yeah, and basically all my neuroscience also learned from Robbie Barr. So I definitely need to like invite him as like the final guest speakers. Yeah, like to give people a more legitimate introduction and understanding in neuroscience, especially like in the field he's working on and super interested in. Yeah, so yeah, let's welcome Brabeeba, and yeah, it's your stage.
Hi everyone, I'm Brabeeba, and thanks Chi-Ning for the very warm and kind words for introductions. I also really enjoy working with him. He's also my best friends, and so yeah, so I guess Chi-Ning talk about my background a little bit, but I will reintroduce myself. So I'm currently the fourth year PhD at MIT, so working on theoretical neuroscience. So try to combine math and neuroscience together. And specifically, I'm working on how can animal have flexible behaviors. So today I will try to talk about like animal intelligence, and then I will try to make connections between animal intelligence and flexible behaviors. And I will tell you what exactly what those two terms are, and hopefully to give you a sense of an idea of like what we mean by intelligence in animal versus like what you commonly think as intelligence in like visual intelligence, I guess. So what is intelligent? You know, like people commonly will say, oh, if you get a high score in a test, like you're pretty smart, you know, or like you are a fast learner, you learn very fast, or like if you touch a new sport, like you become very good very quickly. You seems like you are intelligent, but like there is no clear definition of what intelligent is. And so here are like some example that like people commonly come out with, like you have very good memory, or like you can do math, quick mental math very quickly, or like you can like do abstract reasoning like very well, or like you are like super creative. So I wonder like can people type in the chat on like what they think like the definition of intelligence is, or like some example of intelligent behaviors. Yeah, problem solving is definitely one of them, and probably one of the major one for sure. So I think the the question makes a lot of sense. Is there really a general definitions? So in psychology, like actually, one of the things people try to push forward is sort of like, they are like different dimension of intelligence. You know, like you have like your social intelligence, or like you have your like emotional intelligence. You have your like for you have your like physical intelligence. So but in here I'm trying to sort of like give a more bird eye view on sort of like, are there any some common principle that you can sort of abstract from this specialized intelligence? So like as what Chi-Ning says at the last lecture, is sort of like biology is not as clean as sort of like physics or math, so that like there's a unifying principle that sort of unify all this intelligence. but I think there are some definition they can generalize to most of the intelligence that we see. Yeah, so being able to process information without external attempts, I think is definitely one of the good definition as well. Example, so like a lot of formats, animal berries that we can internally process and sort of like do deductions on like do planning. This is probably like more animal. Like to understand the environment, you can do planning and then to generalize your behavior to different goals. So empathy definitely as well. So animal is like a very, at least more higher level mammals, animals. They are more, oh, sorry for the noise. They are more social. So social intelligence is actually a huge part of like animal intelligence. So in a lot of the disease that neural disease that we see, so such as like schizophrenia and those kind of stuff, like they are usually impaired on both their cognitive ability and their social ability. So somehow the cognitive intelligence are very tied to social intelligence. So can intelligence be absolute instead of relative? Usually we say that something requires intelligence where most people cannot do it. So I'm not too sure how to think. So I guess like I guess the intelligence that you are talking here is more like by comparisons. So but I guess like for this relative definition, I guess it's also like what do you compare it against to, you know, like I feel like at, for example, if you're at Harvard, then like you probably need something do something very smart to be intelligent. But in this talk, I'm mainly focusing on sort of like, can we find certain behaviors that we can do experiment with, or like we can make modeling of theory with to sort of be the proxy of intelligence. So I think definitely appreciations, linguistics, social, artistic, those kind of stuff. They are all very intelligence related, and like as sort of like Han Xu says like they are like theory of like multiple intelligence. And so, but from all the example that we see above is sort of like we can sort of see there are some common theme. So intelligence is not like I can sing a song well, you know, like it's not like I can do a single task well. Like it is something more general. It's like some like something that like is some abstract ability or like some ability that allows you to prosper in multiple different environments. So we will see. And so this is sort of like our great technology achievement so far, and they are very convenient. So, you know, like Google Maps, Google Maps probably do navigation much better than I do. I follow him all the time. AlphaGo, of course, play Go much better than human do. Wolfram Alpha, even as a mathematicians, like I still don't solve differential equations. I ask Wolfram Alpha to solve for me. And like and Google translations, I mean like I use Google translation all the time. Like he knows way more language than I do. And like even like for the facial recognitions for the photo apps. I guess this is one thing that I'm better than our current technology. I do think my facial recognition is better than the technology. But even sometimes I cannot really recognize celebrities' face very well. So, but I think for my friends, like I recognize their face quite well. Yeah. So you can see sort of like common themes between this kind of like machine intelligence is sort of like they're only good at one thing. Yeah. And so this is sort of like so this is one of the great psychologists, the quote says, intelligence, he give a sort of like a working definition of intelligence, which is a certain set of cognitive capacities that enable an individual to adapt and thrive in any given environments they find themselves in. So adapt and thrive are pretty important, and in any given environment are very important. So like it's not one single environment. And those cognitive capacity include those like memory and retrieval and problem solving and so forth. There's a cluster of cognitive abilities that leads to successful adaptation to a wide range of environments. So so adaptation is also important. Adaptation is sort of like learning, you know. Okay. So let's sort of like see classical models in like in machine learning, like in like reinforcement learning. So this is the hedgehog that I have. His name is called Beethoven. And then this is some like wild environment that like Beethoven are very familiar with because like he never leaves cage, you know. So the class ideas of reinforcement learning is that the animals take some actions to interact with the environment. Then in the environment, give the animal some outcome. So maybe like the hedgehog will dig the ground, and then like there will be like a worms coming out, and then like the hedgehog get his food, you know. And so in reinforcement learning, they have a very ambiguous word, so which is called reward, you know, like if you, so like for example, if you like win a game in a game of Go, then like you get reward, you know, like if you get some food, you get reward. But what is reward? And so this is sort of like reward is something very ambiguous and context dependent. So for example, like when I'm hungry, food is very rewarding. But like if I'm like super full, like eating food is very painful. So Chi-Ning and I often go to like all you can eat sushi restaurant, and like every single time after we finish it, like I just don't want to eat any food anymore. Like it becomes super painful. And when you are thirsty, water is rewarding. And then like when you are curious, trying something new, trying something random is very rewarding. And then when you are tired, like sleeping is rewarding. So as you can see, sort of like the definition of reward change based on your internal state. And also it could change based on some external environment as well, as we can see afterward. So so what I'm saying is of like in most of the actually in all probably let's not say all, in most of the machine learning intelligence that we sort of consider, like they just box this idea of reward, but this idea of reward is not dynamically changing based on your internal state or like based on the environment different context. So this is sort of like difference in animal. So and so we sort of like can sort of conclude those like dynamic modulated reward, and then we can replace it with one single word. I call it flexible goals. So sort of like depends on different situations. My goals is different. Yeah, and like so, and but like having a flexible goals, like you still need to resolve a lot of like, you need to know about you understand the environments in order to achieve your goals. So like, for example, like the hedgehog at the beginning doesn't know if this environment has some predator or not, where the food is, like what smell is associated with the food, where is the water, are there any landmark to tell me where river is? Are there any other hedgehog will compete for the food? And how does the geography looks like? And then like how does the weather looks like? Like like hedgehog cannot sort of form in like very cold weather, for example. Yeah, so the hedgehog sort of needs to learn this about environments, sort of resolve this uncertainty about environments, and then use the knowledge that it gains from this environment to achieve its flexible goals. So this idea of you taking actions to resolve an uncertainty is also very important. So this is the this is what I say is sort of like this. There is an internal model building process. So sort of like the hedgehog, after it interacts with the environments, it builds it sort of like incorporate the relevant informations into like its brain, and then think about, oh, this is what I think the environment is, and then so it can do certain like internal processing, planning, like to try to see if I have a different kind of goals, like what kind of action should I take. So but one thing sort of like I want to sort of make clear distinguish here is sort of like the idea of experience versus intelligence. So there are a lot of things that like adult they sort of like do better than we do, like, but I wonder what people's opinions are. Like, do you think that adults are smarter than the children? Like, or like, so adults has more experience, but so this is why they do things better, but are they actually smarter than the children? Oh, and in the chat, I think Renatos has a pretty good points. Like I think return to homeostasis will be a pretty decent substitute. But so, and return to homeostasis is sort of like a little bit similar to the idea of like evolution, in the sense that like instead of trying to optimize toward directions, evolution use certain like thresholding operations. So you can think of this return to homeostasis as sort of like a thresholding around your homeostasis. So maybe there are some connections between this kind of flexible goals and evolutions. Yeah. So I definitely agree that like in terms of like the performance on task, that like the younger group lacks too much information, so it needs to sort of like build up its knowledge first before like it can perform tests. And older people sometimes they have this inherent bias on sort of on doing tests, so sometimes it's harder for them to be very flexible. So so my opinion on this is sort of like this is a time scale issues. So sort of like the younger children, like although they can, I feel like intelligence, what we not look at is like if they can do this task immediately very well, because like if we only care about that, then like you can use a very stupid way of achieving this, which is like memorizing every single if you have like, let's say have a computer, have a robot, you just memorizing every single situations. Yeah, and then what is the optimal response to every single situations? If it is something innumerable, or I just assume it is innumerable, and then like you can perform it very well. But it sounds very, very stupid, you know, like what makes intelligent is sort of like we just need to experience few sample or few situation, but we can generalize to a lot of different places. So so like for the young children, like to me, it's sort of like intelligence is this ability to efficiently learn and adapt to different environments, to build good models, to generalize to different goals. And
can I interrupt and ask maybe dumb questions? Yeah. So I'm thinking this make me wonder, maybe instead of asking like whether like a certain individual or like a certain things is intelligence, maybe intelligence is more about like the process itself. It's more about like the process of being able to learn and being able to like perform some non-trivial task. It is this kind of yeah, rather than specific saying, oh, this kid is intelligent. Yeah, I don't know.
yes,
How do you think about
exactly.
this comment?
Exactly. So like this is exactly what I'm thinking and what my research is about. So like when we judge intelligence, like it is not like you look at one single time point. Like what you should look at is its ability to do meta learning. It is called like do learning to learn. So like how well can you learn something, and then so it is like doing a judgment on your learning process itself. So it is not just looking at your end result. So like mathematically, you can sort of think of it as sort of like you look at like not just a function, but like function of functions. Yeah, so it is something hierarchically higher level. So this is sort of like what I think about what intelligence is. So it is some meta process that allows you to refine your learning process, which allows you to learn very quickly. So yeah, so indeed it is on the not the type. When you judge intelligence, it should not be judged at a one-time point. It should be judged at the entire learning process. So let me see. People in the chat. Yeah, I mean like so intelligence is so like so I agree with Lily's comment. So like actually so the way the brain works is sort of like this. So like it's sort of like from your bone to your like around age of like 23 to 25, like you sort of like still doing this developmental processing. Yeah, and so a lot of neural circuits become more. So at this time, like indeed your neural complexity is, but like but after like actually neuron doesn't degenerate, doesn't generate at a very well. So like your neural complexity is actually after you got mature, like you suppose neural complexity actually is like decreasing, because like a lot of neuron like becomes like old, and then like they die, those kind of stuff. So but we can still apply the same questions to sort of like when you first enter a company, like and like there are like a person who are like who enters a company like 3 years before you, you know, so he do tests better than you. Is he smarter than you? So I think this is still a question mark. So there's still this like dichotomy between experience and intelligence. So let's question on, is it possible to consider some species as intelligence independent of the consideration of environmental adaptations? So my argument is that if you don't have environment, it's almost impossible to define intelligence, because sort of like if you don't have environment to interact with, then like then there is no goal to resolve. I guess like you can have some internal goals, yeah, and like so I think it's very hard to define intelligence without environments. Okay, I'll keep going. So so from sort of our intuitive discussions, we have this like trinity of intelligence. So like the first is this idea of flexible goals. So in like different situations, like when situation can be modulated by internal state, when I'm hungry or thirsty, or like external context, when it's like morning or night, like based on different even the same stimuli is coming in, like you'll choose different behaviors because you have different goals. So this is called flexible goals. And the second thing is that like environment itself, what is very different about the nature versus like a board game, is that the board game, like the environment doesn't change, the game rule is always the same. But in nature, like nature is not only uncertain, we don't know a lot of things about it, but like it is changing constantly. So one example is like I like hiking, but like hiking at different mountain is sort of like different experience, like every single times. And like but somehow, even though I never hiked at that mountain before, or like I never climbed the rocks before, like we are able to figure out on the spot how to adapt to this like changing a certain environments. So so this is sort of like one example of like of this. So and then the third thing is that in order for you to sort of like achieve different goals and then be able to generalize at the same time, you want to understand, build an internal model of the world, so that like, since if you only care about like, let's say one single goal, then this internal model of the world will be like very biased toward the goals. So like usually what we want is sort of like you probably have like multiple needs, and then you sort of build the internal model of the world around those needs. And then like when you sort of change your needs, then like you can easily use your knowledge, and then you can generalize to different needs. So let me sort of like give an example of like flexible behaviors. So like this is sort of like my typical day of doing research. So like in the morning, I would decide, okay, let's sit down and do research. Yeah, and then I sit down and begin to do research. And then in the middle of research, like I'll feel thirsty. And so I will stop my research and I'll drink water a little bit. So like this. And then I will go back to research. And then I will receive a text from mom. So this is internal state. This is some external stuff. Then like I flexibly change my behavior. So let me text back to my mom, and then I go back to research. And then when I become bored, like I'm like, let me go on YouTube a little bit and procrastinate, and I go back to research. So as you can see, sort of like the our behavior like is not very like when I switch to like other behaviors, like those I didn't think about doing research anymore. You know, like my behavior is like I'm doing this other stuff at the same time. So this is like this idea of like how animals can have like many different goals, and then depends on different state and stimuli, is one of the crucial things in defining animal intelligence. So, and this is another thing. So like, for example, like one things that I have been very puzzling is my social intelligence skill, especially regarding to like how to discern the emotion of other human being, you know. So like so sometimes maybe like if I go to lab and then I see one of my colleagues' face is like very focused, yeah, but like she or like he or she doesn't smile, you know, and I will begin to wonder, oh, if he or she is angry or like if he or she is focused right now. And then so after you talk to her, then like because like after you talk to her and then you realize, oh, she's not in a good mood, yeah. So then if she's not in a good mood, now you get this information. So like you know that, oh, you shouldn't bother her with stuffs, you know, or like maybe you should do something to help her to get out of this yeah. But the difficult part is sort of like this kind of state also change depends on time. So after 3 hours later, maybe like she changed to a different moods. So like how do we adapt to like a uncertain environment, but it is also changing at the same times, is sort of like another hallmarks of intelligence. So the third thing is like efficiently building an internal model of the world. So this is a very famous experiment. So basically, researcher build the glasses that will shift your visual field to the right. And then they will ask the participant to sort of like throw a basketball, you know. And since your visual field is shifted to the right, your ball will always be a right of a basket. And then, but after you keep trying for 30 minutes after, then like you can shoot it perfectly. Ball will be at the center. But after you take out the glasses, even though you return to your normal visions, like if you try to throw it straight, ball will be at the left of the basket. Because sort of like your visions has already been adjusted to match the internal model of the world. So this is sort of like a proof that like we build the internal model of the world. So in this case, it's sort of like a modified version of the internal model of the world. Okay, so before we get into the next sessions, let me look at the chat. So yeah, so Chi-Ning asked the questions on like, do you think intelligence could be more like a principle rather than specific instantiations? So namely, it probably make more sense to abstract out phenomenon and process rather than concrete neural implementations. So my opinion is like this: if you can figure out, like let's say like a mathematical instantiation or algorithmic instantiation of like intelligence, then you probably don't need like to study your brain. You know, like it's already very impressive on its own if you can just create an artificial human. But my guess is sort of like the search space is the hypothesis space is so large that it is very, very difficult for you to find it, like just from the air. So having clue from neuroscience will allows you, neuroscience or like psychology or all those kind of stuff will allows you to find that principle more easily. And I'm going to, for the later half of the presentation, I'm going to talk about some neuroscience approach on how to study cognition and intelligence. So what if their interaction with the environment, but the relationship to the environment might not necessarily be adapting? So yeah, like so this is also one of the hallmark of intelligence, which is sort of like generalizations. So maybe the environment looks like they are changing, but certain aspect of the environment, which is a relationship between the environments, are not changing. So we are able to learn it, and which but we still don't have a clear understanding on what is the exact neural representation of it. Okay, so Chi has a question on the common experience of coming up with research idea solution while doing something completely irrelevant. So this is more hypothetical. So like what I believe, what I sort of believe is the following. Okay. So so this is my hypothesized architecture of like how things are working. So maybe imagine that like you have sort of like maybe like different populations of like neurons, maybe different population correspond to like different goal at the same times. Yeah, and then like there are some competition between them. You know. So like usually at one time you can only focus on one thing. But but what is the input? The input is your efficient internal model of the world. So like for example, if I receive my mom's text, then my mom's text will be much relevant to the behavior of like texting my mom back. It will give strong input here. Yeah, so like so the common experience of like complete irrelevant is you build some relation, they are very generalizable. So when you're cooking, like it actually give some input to research as well. And like this is something called like inspiration. Now, once it above certain threshold, you'll realize, oh, I get this idea. So maybe this is why it is, but no idea. So for the visual shift example, actually probably both vision and motor adapts. And I think that's what the paper shows, but I need to go find the papers. I don't know what change Catherine is referring to now, since it was a little bit long ago. But so I guess I will skip that for now. Okay, so let's go into the second half of the presentations. So so the question is sort of like, how do we study this? Like as sort of what Chi-Ning said before, like in neuroscience, there are like just so many different levels that you can study. You can study from a genetic level, you can study from the molecular level, you can study from a cellular level, you can study from the circle level, you can study from a system level, you can study from a cognition level, you can study from a behavioral level. So, but And each lab, usually they focus on one level only. But what's beautiful about neuroscience is that like there are different species, there are different tools for you to prop like different levels. So like, for example, if we do human experiment, then like we can prop like more higher level stuff, because like one advantage of human is that you can actually ask them questions. You cannot ask my HR questions, you know. Yeah, but for animal example, you can do a lot of genetic manipulation. You can do recoding on their neuron. You cannot really stick an electrode in human's brain. So and what is really needed in this kind of fields with like emergence phenomenon is that you need to do a vertically integrated approach. So sort of like you go from bottom up to top down and then trying to connect all of them together. So I will give some, I wouldn't give a full example of this, but I will give a little bit of an example of this on sort of like how neuroscience have been studying this animal intelligence so far. So this is a classical clinical test to test if your prefrontal cortex, which is the forward part of your cortex, has been damaged or not. So this prefrontal cortex is widely regarded as like the center of your intelligence. So one of the most famous patient in the neuroscience history is called Phineas Cage. So like he's a railroad worker, and but one day like a rod go through his brain, go through his prefrontal cortex, and like but he didn't die, but he doesn't have his prefrontal cortex anymore. And after that, like he becomes very non-adapting, and then like he cannot control his emotions, and like he can only focus on one things, you know. He doesn't have these flexible behaviors anymore. Yeah, and so what's interesting for Harvard student is that like actually his skull is actually in the Harvard Museum. So you should go check it out if you haven't. This is a very famous case. So clinically, like for a doctor to test if you have like prefrontal cortex damage, they use the following task to do it. This is called Wisconsin sorting task. So what they do is that they will have 4 piles of cards, and then have it. So you can notice that like they have different attribute. You know, like there are 3-dimensional attribute. There are number of objects. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There are different color, and there are different shape. So like the doctor will ask the patients is sort of like which one does this belong to? So it can belong to this, right? Because they have the same number of the same number of objects, or it can belong to this because they have same shape, or it can belong to this because they have the same color. But at each time, like there is only one rule that is right. So like either they are like same color or same number or same shape. So and the doctor doesn't tell the patient about it. But the doctor, when the patient tries to sort it into the first one, the doctor will say, "Oh, you are right or you are wrong." So for the patient with prefrontal cortex damage, like they can actually do this test perfectly. But if the doctor, like in the midway, suddenly change the rule, so let's say originally you are asked to sort the test according to color, but like if doctor, let's say after 10 trials, switch it to number, and then people with prefrontal cortex damage, even though that they know that they shouldn't sort it according to color, they cannot change their behavior. They just keep sorting them to a color. So this is sort of like the classical lesion study to sort of like understand what area of the brain are more important, and to this kind of flexible behaviors, and how do, and so by knowing what area of our brains and how does it change our behavior output. So by knowing this too, then like we can use more molecular techniques, more genetic techniques, more system techniques to understand the mechanism behind it. So which is the second example I'm going to talk about. Yeah, and Chi-Ning shares about the Phoenix cage stuff. So so I'm going to talk about a very cool, probably the most important neuroscience techniques in past decades is this optogenetics, and we'll see a video of this. So this is laser off. So you can see mice are just roaming around without doing anything. And once the laser on, mice become very aggressive, just like a predator, you know. You can see begin eating. And then even it's like some random objects, once the laser is on, like he will still try to eat it. You know? So let me try to explain like what exactly we are seeing right now. So optogenetic is a technique where so first of all, people engineer a certain protein to that can be activated if you shine a laser on top of it. So what optogenetics do is that they use some virus to inject to, so first of all, like you can find the neuron that you are interested in, and then you can try to identify what gene like it will express. So like different kind of neuron will express different kind of gene. So if you can find the specialized gene that this neuron express, then you can sort of like insert that special protein like next to that gene, so that when it express that specific gene, it also express this protein. So when you shine the laser on top, only that specific neuron will get activated or get inhibited, depends on what kind of protein that you use. So like in this case, like what we see is sort of like it was targeting certain neuron in the emotional center of our brain called amygdala. So like the certain area is called CEA. So it sort of like induce this like predating behaviors. So and we are going to see an example of how to use optogenetics to study intelligence. Okay, so this yes, there are opposite experiments where laser on mice become trailer as well. Yeah, but I don't think that you can use it on your cat. Because like this kind of genetic techniques is actually more well developed in mice. So, but right now people are trying to develop other model animal as well. So like it's much harder to do this on other animals. But right now people can some of it on like marmoset, tree shrew, on like fruit flies, those kind of stuff. But this is like a main advantage of using mice as your animal model, because like so many people have been doing this. So like the tools are very well developed. So the experiment is sort of the following. So there are so you have a mice, and then the mice will ask to do like poke his nose to the left or right, and there is an evidence accumulation phase. So the evidence accumulation phase will consist of like 16 different pulses of noise. Some pulses are neutral, so like neutral pitch, and then some pulses are like higher pitch, and some pulses are lower pitch. So like the mice need to distinguish like out of these 16 poses, are there more higher pitch sounds or like are there more lower pitch sounds? If there are more higher pitch sounds, or if there are more lower pitch sound, then it should pay attention to vision cue. But like you should ignore this. Just say it should choose left, for example. Yeah, and if there are more higher pitch sound, then it should choose right, for example. Yeah, the real test is more complicated, but it's not relevant to the talks today. Okay, so and by doing some genetic study, so what people have discovered is that like this is the prefrontal cortex, and then these are neurons, they are selective to the lower pitch sound, and these are neurons selective to higher pitch sound. And there are these two types of neurons marked by different gene. So this is marked by D2 gene, this is marked by GRID4 gene. And like what people have discovered is like there are connections between this prefrontal cortex neuron to this MD thalamus, which is another area. So and then there are connection back to modulate this. So we are going to use optogenetic technique to try to understand like what each type of gene, each type of neuron marked by this gene is doing. So first of all, like they use optogenetic to inhibit your prefrontal cortex. So as prefrontal cortex is the center of your intelligence, after you inhibit it, your performance are just by chance. It's just like, you can see that like you are just like 0.5%. So the x-axis is relative conflict. So what does conflict mean? Conflict means like if there are a lot of red and a lot of blue at the same time. If there are all red, no blue, then like there are no conflicts. So high conflicts are very difficult to distinguish. And but like if you try to inhibit these MD populations, then what you discover is that you can still do the task at the easy task level. But when the test becomes harder, then you cannot do it anymore. And so like, so the one natural things that researchers are thinking are like, oh, then these two populations, they are probably related to conflicts, right? Because that's the only thing that's sort of change. So what I discovered is that, oh, for GRID4 neurons, it is selected to conflicts. But for D2 neuron, like it doesn't seem like it's that selected to conflicts. Oh, yeah, and what they do is then use the genetic techniques to like specifically only inhibit one population versus the other. And you can see at the low conflict at the low conflict stuff, when you let's say inhibit the GRID4 populations, it decreases performance. But at a high conflict stuff, like when you inhibit, like this is sort of how we care, you know, like it decreases its performance to chance level. But at a high conflict stuff, if you inhibit the MD, it actually does not, it actually increases your performance for some reasons. And then so what we can sort of conclude is sort of like in here, when you this drops at the high conflict case is contributed by the inhibition of GRID4. So GRID4 somehow help you to resolve conflicts. So the reason that it helps you to resolve conflicts is that it's send these inhibitions so to sort of like makes your evidence accumulation process longer, so that you have more time to think about which one is better, for example. And so let's design another experiment. Is the difficulty is induced by the sparsity of the evidence. So like the model signal will only have like, so there's no conflicts, it's all red or blue. And the difficulty will only be induced by the sparsity of signal. So so if you have sparse evidence, then it will be more difficult, right? So then like when you inhibit GRID4 and D2, like respectively, if you inhibit GRID4 in this test, you actually somehow your performance increase. but you can see that like when you inhibit D2, like D2 is sort of like the population that helps you to amplify the signal. So when you inhibit D2 at the low conflict situations, you cannot do a test anymore. So then like then sort of like we using optogenetic, we sort of understand the role of two parts. So two is there when the signal is sparse to amplify the signal, while Greek 4 is there to if you have some conflicting evidence to sort of like inhibit the conflicting evidence and then to prolong the evidence accumulation process. So this is sort of like how people currently, neuroscientists currently experiment to study the genetic level and the circle level of intelligence. So this is a takeaway of a result. So for similar tests with two different sorts of difficulty, one is high conflicting evidence, while the other is a sparsity of signal. The brain will somehow identify what is the nature of a difficulty, if it's sparsity or high conflict, and use the corresponding tool to tackle the problems. Okay, so this is the very end. The food for thoughts is that so the first sentence is sort of like our philosophical discussion. So which I think intelligence is the ability to adapt to uncertain and changing environments and to achieve many different goals. But I guess one question is like, in order to do this, you need to understand the environment to generalize the behaviors to different goals. But what is understanding? And then does understanding have any relationship with intelligence and creativity? So these are something left for you guys to think about. So this is my talk. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Let's thank Brabeeba for the amazing talk. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, learn a lot, and yeah, lots of thinking can be going on. Yes. So maybe it's time for people can ask questions. And in fact, my prefrontal cortex tell me to go to restroom now, so I'll disappear for 1 minute, but I'll still keep the recording on, and people feel free to ask questions. Yeah, and sorry about that.
Less flexible behaviors. Thank you, guys. Any questions? Feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself. What else do you think as well? So this is actually what drew me to neuroscience. So like it's actually very funny. Like we can talk about like small stuff like atom or like big stuff like universe, and we know it pretty well. Like we can have like some theory to experiment about it, or like even for biology, like we can talk about like what is the function of our heart, or like what is the function of our digestion system. We also understand pretty well. But like when we talk about what's the function of our brain, like somehow we just have like zero understanding of it. Like when I say zero, I mean like actually zero. Yeah. So I think it is incredibly difficult questions. And this is what all the unknown and then all the possible stuff for me to explore is sort of what drew me to it. So fully understand our brain completely, I think is a very daunting task. Yeah, but I think that will be the future of the next century.
Hi, I'm back. Yeah, and if people don't have other questions, I do have a lot. So yeah, let me ask. Maybe I want to start with a more broader questions. Yeah. Okay. Maybe sorry. Maybe let me start with maybe related to the how you talk at the end. Yeah. So we can see that like although there are indeed lots of amazing neuroscience experiments using like a very frontier technology, yeah, can do lots of I mean like even can understand like to like a circuits level or even individual neuron levels and connect to the behavior. Yeah, but from my in general feeling is also like yeah, the task they can do is still quite limited, still like very case by case. So similar to maybe what like in pre-Newtonian eras, like people can have some point by point observation. So I'm very curious about like your opinions on like this kind of like experimental research. Yeah, because I can expect like say in 5-10 years people can have so many similar experiments and on all different tasks. Yeah, and you can keep trying to identify like a different, yeah, like a type of neuron corresponding to different part of the, I don't know, like the activity or something like conflict, etc. But in long run, how do you really think like people can get from this kind of very bottom up experiments?
So I think like what's very important is that like for this kind of experiment, what we get is sort of the ground truth of like what nature is doing. But as you say, it's actually like for our brain, for like each neurons, they are very multiplex. So like for different behaviors, actually the same, maybe this conflict preferring neurons, like for different behaviors, is actually doing completely something else, you know, like on the surface. But like there are some underlying principle that sort of like should be able to generalize across that. So I feel like what experimenters are doing is sort of like collecting different evidence on sort of like at different behaviors, what are the robust behavior for like different modules. And it is up to people like us, like who do theory, or like some like even some deep thinker in experimenters to come up with some idea to generalize across all the different behaviors to build up a more not just a point observation theory, but like a line or even the surface.
Thanks. And maybe as a follow-up and also like a slightly more broader question then is like because you are probably the only like a series I saw in neuroscience. Yeah, I know in person, and I'm quite curious. Also, like you have very strong mathematics background, so I'm thinking like, what's your vision and opinions on like how can like a theory plays a role, and especially like is there any new paradigm you will come up you would think that's reasonable, yeah, for people to approach in a like a hybrid, like a theoretical and an experimental way to study like the brain or biggest mystery?
I feel like one of the big things of I feel most of the theory that we receive success so far are coming from this optimization perspective of like having like this single objective. And I feel like one very exciting things right now for theory people to really try to understand is exactly at the beginning of our philosophical discussion on what does flexible goals means, you know, like it's I mean, like having different goals and then like probably doesn't mean that like you just having random goals as sometimes at like random moments. There are probably some reason behind these flexible goals and how to develop the theory around that. And maybe less related to evolutions, you know, like evolution at like short time scale, like you seems like it sort of has a goal, or like certain feature like probably looks like is like increase fitness at this situation, but it actually doesn't increase fitness at the other situations. So sort of like there are also like this flexible definition of fitness. So maybe to create a connection between these two fields might be the next big picture in understanding, in theoretical understanding of intelligence.
Thanks. Oh, and I think there's a question in the chat by CJ.
So most math that are used in theoretical neuroscience are probably like dynamical system, and probably some probability theory. And so these two are probably the two main things. And so there are some success on both, but I think that I think people should probably incorporate more geometry and topology insights. And the reason is that like I think, which is the representation of this understanding. So what I believe is that like what is understanding? Understanding is something, is some high dimensional, some with some non-trivial geometry objects that you cannot sort of describe it, you know. And I think since its representation is geometry inherently, you must use some geometry to sort of like understand it. So, but this is sort of my belief, yeah. So but currently there are not much geometry research in theoretical neuroscience. People are still more focused on the analysis and probability part of the math. And also actually, I think you need new kind of math, to be honest. I think to understand brain, you need not just what I just say. Yeah, I think you need some new math. It probably could be another branch of math.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, related to what you said, and speaking of math, it's like I also curious, like, how do you think the necessity role of math in studying the brain? Like, could that be the case that actually, if we are looking for very like a solid mathematical understanding, might actually push us further away from a good understanding? Yeah, because maybe it is really difficult to really have a nice mathematical understanding. And what's your opinion? And if we need some new kind of math, yeah, what kind of property of that kind of new math is required?
So I think what you just say makes sense, but I think it depends on which level you're talking about. So if you're only talking about the surface level using math to understand, then I think you might run into a problem. But I think if you are talking about to study something as general as intelligence, so which is like a process to monitor, to improve your lower level learning process, then I think you can use math to describe it. This is sort of like an evolution idea, right? So like, so if you try to specialize in certain species, certain environment, and try to use mathematical models to understand evolution, it's probably very hard to understand it. But the meta level principle is just like, you have variations, and then you have inheritable trait, and you have selections. And that's math, you know. But like how to illuminate from this principle, high level principle, to the lower level stuff, they can give us more illuminating insight. I think that is another questions. And I believe you can get the math on the higher level stuff, but for lower level stuff, it might push you away.
People have,
I agree with CJ.
Do people have more questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. Or if not, let's maybe thank Brabeeba again, and I'll stop the recording.
Thank you, guys.